happen. So there's dead cats, ashes.
Absolutely. And what
They both
happened was
wanted them?
they both wanted
Why
them.
not just 50-50?
That's what got the binder thrown at me. I told my client, I go, why don't you split them? She says no, and threw the binder at me and was so offended that I said that.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Cases Gone Wild. And today we have some of the most craziest, ridiculous, out of control cases. We have a special guest today, Jeff Abood, who's a good friend of mine. He's a family law attorney. We're going to talk about all these crazy family law cases, which I thought, personal injury, all these stuff that I do, civil rights, employment, I thought that was crazy. Wait till you hear some of the cases we have for you today. Again, Cases Gone Wild. If you like the show, please follow us. Please share it with your friends and your family. And remember, we're dressed up all nice for you. Please watch us on YouTube. You can go to the Marco Law YouTube channel and actually watch live video of this. Also, watch us on all your normal platforms, Audible, Spotify, whatever you have, and please share. So today I'd like to introduce Jeff Abood. Jeff, thanks for being on the show, buddy.
Thank you for having me. It's always good to see you, and it's good to be here on your show. I've
good to see you.
Seen some of it online. I've listened to some of them, and I'm honored that you asked me to come on the show.
Well, we're honored to have you, man. And
thank you.
I'll tell the viewers a little bit about you, your practice. First of all, the Abood name is a big name, right? You have your cousin, Andrew Abood, who I know very well, kind of has a Lansing presence, and your office is in Birmingham, and I understand you just got a huge new office space, a huge, brand beautiful place.
We did. I wouldn't necessarily say huge, but it turned out really nice. It was a long project. We found the space that we wanted. A little before COVID, we had outgrown our old office, and it was probably a 2.5, 3-year construction project just because I got to have time to design it exactly the way I want it, and it just turned out the way we like it. So
that's awesome. And I know your old office was right above Market on Old Woodward in downtown Birmingham, which was really cool.
That's correct. I didn't want to give up that space, so I'd renewed the lease, and I put a title agency there when courts were closed during COVID, and was trying to find something to do other than smoke a lot of cigars in those first few months that courts were completely closed. So we started a title agency, and thank God that's thriving. So we put that at that location, and the law firm's at the new spot.
Well, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I'll tell the viewers a little bit about you. You actually were you're Lebanese. Your family's from Lebanon, right?
That is correct. Yes.
And you grew up in Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri of all places. Only a few Lebanese families there, and I had no clue there were so many other Lebanese people until I moved to Michigan.
Yeah.
But my dad ended up, my family's Lebanese Catholic. My dad ended up at a Baptist school in southern Missouri, and so we grew up there. And my grandparents knew each other apparently from Lansing, which is where our whole family went, and hence the Abood law firm originating in Lansing. And as you mentioned with Andrew, he's one of 10 kids, and him and 6 other siblings, so 7 of them are actually all lawyers as well. So.
Oh wow,
yeah,
that's amazing. And you graduated from Cooley Law School in 2007.
That is correct, yeah.
And you've been practicing. Did you always have your own firm, or how did it work?
You know what happened was right after law school, I spent some time in California with a friend of mine who did a lot of entertainment law, represents race car drivers, did some contract type stuff, spent a lot of time in Vegas. I was representing a lot of actors, entertainers, singers at shows, negotiating their contracts for them. Then I moved back to Michigan permanently about 1.5 years after that, and I started my own firm. Well, I worked for my uncle a little bit doing liquor license work, transactional work, which I still do some of. It just wasn't as exciting for me as being in a courtroom. So I started out my own practice and was handling mostly criminal cases at the time. That's where I got a lot of my courtroom experience, my trial experience, my experience handling a lot of, I guess, high profile cases, a lot of people that are well known, and got a lot of notoriety that way. And then eventually got into handling divorce cases. And a few years later, I eventually merged with the Abood law firm, and with my cousin Andrew, we partnered up and expanded our offices.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Throughout the state and even outside the state.
I see your guys' logo at the Michigan State games and everything. I know you're doing really well. Your cousin's a very good guy too, as well. And you had a lot of high-profile clients. You represent a lot of professional athletes, I understand.
That's correct. So, yeah, so most of my practice, as you said, is family law and criminal defense. My criminal more so is limited to a lot of professionals, professional athletes. A lot of my cases within the criminal realm are a lot of physicians, other lawyers, judges, people with a professional license, whether it be an insurance license, people that drive trucks for a living, people that really need their license. And those usually end up being drug and alcohol related cases. And
so like DUIs and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that.
And actually we, in the last 6 months, I believe we've gotten about 5 OWIs, which is what they're called in Michigan, for drunk drivings, essentially dismissed on motions to suppress, which we're kind of proud of. And we do all the work on those. We get the audio, the video. We will file the motions to suppress and run those hearings. And the sad thing is a lot of lawyers these days, at least younger lawyers I see, that are just skimming through a police report and accepting the first plea offer. Well, obviously the police report usually says whatever the cop wants it to say.
Right.
And they're not even bothering getting to audio and video. And that's what happens, unfortunately, I think, when people are flat feeing or not really, because you can't afford to do that good a job. I couldn't sleep at night, even if I'm handling a case pro bono, I couldn't sleep at night unless I knew I did every single possible thing, because I don't want to say a lot of these cases, but some of these cases are winnable, and you're not going to know unless you do the work. You've got to get the audio. You got to get the video. Sometimes you got to get the calibration logs. You got to get everything out there that you can. You have to study it. And if you don't have the experience to do it yourself, trust me, there's a lot of great experienced lawyers in this state that are willing to help you out and to go through it with you and teach you as a younger lawyer. And I just hope
you can't cut the corners.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing in my practice, and that's just something that we see a lot is, one of my mentors, Jeff Feiger, always said, the biggest secret to my work, it's working hard. It's hard work, and there's 100%. No shortcuts.
100%. I think I saw something today on social media as well that said, don't be fooled by somebody that's going to get success real quickly, because there's no such thing, and that might not be sustainable. You've got to continue to work hard. That's another thing. And I think guys like you and I are probably the last generation that there's a few exceptions out there that are still willing to work really hard. And even in our generation, I don't see too many others doing what we do. And that's the thing. And people ask me these days when I will be interviewing or even just talking to younger lawyers, they go, what's the work-life balance ratio like? And I go, guys, this is a profession. It's eyes open, eyes shut, and sometimes even in between, you're thinking about the case as well. I'm constantly thinking about my clients' cases. Constantly. This morning, I'm in my son's indoor soccer practice, as I'm watching him, unfortunately I missed a goal he scored during their scrimmage, because I was on my phone researching something on a new interesting case that I got hired on, and I'm thinking about it nonstop, whether I'm in the office or not. And
that's the sad thing, because I have a lot of people say too, what is the work-life balance? And look, in an ideal world or life, you can have a great work-life balance. The reality is, if you want to be the best, whether, you want to be the best lawyer, you want to be the best, you want to be the Michael Jordan of basketball, there's not much of a work-life balance, because you have to care enough to be constantly thinking about it, constantly on the ball, constantly on point. Family is so important. I love my kids. They are my life. They are the most important things in my life. But other than that, my work comes first.
100%.
I mean,
100%. And that's how we support our families. And my kids are around the same age as your kids as well. I love them. And unfortunately, sometimes we do have to miss things because we're out working to give them a good life and to be able to help people. And that's first and foremost about, are there other jobs or other businesses that we could be doing and potentially making more money? Absolutely. But at the same time, what we're doing is we're serving people, we're helping people. And I think that's why that's why a lot of us went to law school.
Right.
And for lawyers that truly, genuinely care and do a good job, absolutely, that's what it's about.
And the success comes, right?
100%.
When you get up and you want to go do this and you're putting it in and you're loving it and you're caring, you can be successful.
And is it going to be expensive for the clients to have good representation? Yeah, that's part of the deal. I was reading an article, and ironic because it comes to mind now because I talked about soccer, but I was reading an article in a bar journal one time, and it said, why or don't feel guilty about your hourly rates being so high as a lawyer, because And an example was while you're at your kid's soccer game, you're thinking about your client's case. It's even last night, a client of mine was texting me before something important that they had. And I said, listen, I go, you paid me to worry for you now. Please focus on your job, focus on your family. My job is to worry about you and your case.
My job's to carry. That's
100%.
right.
That's what you're paying me to do.
Now, I understand. So you've been kind of a celebrity lawyer, so to speak. And I understand you just met Jay-Z or at a party with Jay-Z out in L.A. or...
This was actually a few years back, but we were chatting about this a little earlier, and I didn't recognize. I knew what Jay-Z looked like from when I was a kid. I don't watch a lot of TV. The time I watch TV is if any of my clients are playing, whether it's an NBA game or NFL game, or it's obviously rooting for our hometown teams, the Lions, the Pistons, and watching those games. Other than that, there's a few reality shows that I might watch, like $1 Million Listings or Shark Tank, which I enjoy. Rarely ever watch TV. And I don't keep up to date with what celebrities necessarily look like unless somehow I'm involved in their case. Well, I'm not involved in any way whatsoever with any cases with Jay-Z, but I was in LA with a client at the Staples Center, now I believe called Crypto.com, where the Lakers and Clippers play. And I'm back in a very famous client, I'm sure. And I'm back in the players' family section. And I get introduced to this guy, and my client who introduced me says, hey, this is my lawyer. This guy gives me a hug, high fives me, gives me a hug. We walk out. Amongst us are some other retired basketball players and other people who are obviously well known. But we walk out after both NBA teams have already ran out onto the floor, the home team and the visiting team. And everybody's cheering. And I'm looking around. I'm like, why are they still cheering? Okay, maybe it's for some of these retired guys. I have no clue. I go sit down. I sit next to one of my client's family members, and she says, hey, is Beyonce here? I said, I don't know. Why would Beyonce be here? She goes, because Jay-Z's here. I'm like, oh, cool. Where is he? And I look around. She's like, Jeff, you walked in with him. She goes, that's the guy you walked in with. And I'm like, oh, man, I felt like such an idiot for not knowing. I went after the game and reintroduced myself again to him. And great guy, super nice guy. And the success he's built and what he's done has just been absolutely incredible. But that happens to me a lot, especially when I'm in LA for clients and cases out there and running into people, unless it was somebody that I recognized from a reality show or an athlete that I know. Other than that, I typically... I don't follow along with that stuff, but
that's fun though.
And at one point it transitioned from doing a lot of criminal work to doing mostly family law. But again, like I said, I'm still involved in that. And that's another kind of weird story how that happened as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of your crazy, because you are in Cases Gone Wild. And so we need to hear about some of your crazy cases. Now I'm guessing, and look, my family law experience, as I told in the previous episode, is very limited. I had like one family law case when I was a summer associate. Mm-hmm. I hated it. It was two people fighting over a toaster because the wife loved the toaster and the husband didn't want her to have it. And so it's a very emotional, it seems like, area of the law.
And that's exactly the toaster story. I've got so many similar stories to that. And usually when that happens is at the very end. And that's when they realize that the divorce is about to become really real. And that could be at the end in Michigan, there's a maximum 1 year. Typically, there's a few exceptions to the rule, but you've got to be divorced within a year. If you're not settled by then, a judge is setting a trial right before that 1 year mark or at the 1 year mark. And in order to...
And so when you have divorce, so people know, you actually can have a trial. I mean, they're not common, right? They settle.
Very few cases go to trial. I had one case, actually one of the first cases that I had worked on. It wasn't my case, but a case that went to trial was one where husband's in the hospital with a coma.
Oh my gosh.
Wife is at, I believe it was either a concert or a professional ball game. And what happened was it was somehow the lottery was involved there, and they draw a number and either you make a basket or you shoot a hoop or whatever it was at the time. And I can't remember, again, this was when I was either a young lawyer or still an intern working with another lawyer on this case. And she ended up winning the lottery. Well,
her husband's in a coma?
Her husband's in a coma.
Are they already in divorce yet or no?
The divorce had either just been filed. I don't think it had been filed. I think it had just been filed. It had just been filed. He gets injured at work. He's in a coma.
Oh my gosh.
What happens then is she ends up winning the lotto, but she has I believe it was her cousin sitting right next to her, who then tries to say that it was her cousin who actually won the lotto because he's the one that put up the money for the ticket. She just made the basket or whatever it was at the time. And so that case actually went to trial because husband was arguing it was marital income.
How does that work? Like, let's say I'm getting a divorce and I win the lotto in the middle of my divorce. Is the lotto money then
it's
marital
probably
property?
still considered marital property because most cases, while a divorce is pending, there's still a status quo order in place and a preservation of assets order. Preservation, nobody can buy, sell, spend, borrow, charge, do anything out of ordinary course of business. Status quo, wherever your paychecks get deposited, have to continue to be deposited. Whatever bills are being paid have to continue to be paid. It stays the same.
Oh my gosh, that would be the worst. Like you're getting a divorce and then you win the lottery and then you got to split it with your ex.
And it all depends. There's no black and white at all in divorce. And listen, that's the issue is people ask me what's going to happen. Well, I don't know. And everything changes. Michigan's equitable division. What does that mean? It means what's fair. What's fair? Usually 50-50, usually half of the marital assets. But it always comes down to, not always, but most time comes down to that toaster. I had a case representing a lawyer, a lot of money involved in the divorce case. Everything was going well. At the very end, they get in a fight over the kitchen bar stools. And that
are
is
worth
what
how
held
much
it
money?
up.
That are worth like...
Probably not enough.
It's not about the bar stool, right?
Yeah. Another case, they got in a fight over a 2005 car, and it wasn't even a classic or anything rare. It was a rusted car that they both insisted on wanting it. Another lawyer calls me up. He's like, hey, how about we just pitch in the money and buy them another car like it without the rust? Yeah. And it's just crazy stuff like that it comes down to.
I saw something online about like Beanie Babies. You remember when Beanie Babies were the rage?
Yes,
like these people got divorced. The judge made them bring in the Beanie Babies into the courthouse. There was like 100 Beanie Babies. And this was when Beanie Babies were like
worth a lot of money.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they had to do a Beanie Baby draft. So the husband got to pick one, the wife got to pick a Beanie Baby. Then the husband got to pick a Beanie Baby, the wife got to pick a Beanie Baby. I hate it's very emotionally driven, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah. That reminds me of a case where one time there was a husband and wife, and this was not in the Metro Detroit area, but it was in another county in Michigan, and it was a brand new judge handling divorce cases, and the couple were fighting over, I believe it was an ATV and the trailer. So what does a judge do? She gives one the trailer and some cash, the other one the ATV. The guy that got the ATV, I think it was the husband who got the ATV, was pissed that he didn't get the trailer. And the wife, ex-wife, got the trailer without the ATV and had no need for it. So it was just crazy
it's
things.
just crazy
But here's
stuff.
the thing, and I tell all my clients this most of the time. In a divorce case, if you go in front of a judge is probably going to do something that's going to make you both upset or equally upset. You're better off settling your case in most situations with a mediator through the assistance of your counsel and settling for less than what you think you probably should. But if you both walk away equally unhappy, that's probably the result you want. But at least you were the architect and had a hand in trying to decide how you're dividing everything as opposed to having the judge just rule. Because most of judges
don't get a jury, right?
No, you don't. And judges don't want to make decisions regarding your family law stuff most of the time. Some judges do. Most of the times they don't want to. And if they do it, they're probably going to do something that's going to make you both unhappy.
Well,
and it's going to cost you a lot of money.
What's the stupidest thing you've ever seen somebody fight over a piece of property?
Listen, I'm not here to judge what's stupid and what's not stupid, but I've seen some crazy things people have spent a lot of money fighting over that's worth more than what it was. Something simple, I've got a crazier one, but something simple was one time this divorce worth several $1 million. They got in a fight over a credit card that had a $3,000 balance. At the end, they forgot to, we went to mediation. We mediated this case till the next morning, all night, through the night, everything, which we don't do that much anymore. But in the old days, and when I first started, a lot of mediators did that. Now we like to break it up into sessions. That way, nobody feels like they're waking up with buyer's remorse the next day. And we want to make sure people are fresh when they're in there negotiating. But that was like the old-fashioned way where they set a mediation the night before trial or whatever it is.
And you go all night.
Go all night. That one, this credit card, then they end up spending more money than what's worth fighting over, and judge ends up splitting it anyway and go through it. But I had one time. This is something very, very memorable. This is actually when my client threw a binder in my face at one point. And this all happened. This was a case where there were a lot of, the couple had done a good job investing. There's a lot of investment accounts, a lot of stocks. We had financial experts on each side spending money on trying to figure out where the money is, whose money is what, doing the normal stuff we do in a property case. Well, then it came down to personal property, and personal property usually goes to arbitration. A lot of times people will go after the divorce is done with a personal property arbitrator as opposed to paying their lawyers.
So an arbitrator is like a lawyer that both sides pick, who basically makes
a decision, and it's a lot harder to appeal like it is with a judge.
Yeah, and then it's done.
Done.
The good thing is it's simple. It's done
completely. In most situations with personal property, if our clients can't agree, the parties can't agree, go to arbitration. Sometimes they'll realize even that costs more money in the property. But one crazy one that our clients insisted on having resolved before the case was done was they had their deceased cat's ashes.
So the dead cat's ashes, are they like in an urn or something?
Yes.
Dude, every case has gone wild that we've done, I feel like, involves a dead person's body or ashes every single time. I swear, I don't know what it is. Yeah. It's like these crazy cases. The last one, we had Judge Draper talking about a dead body rolling down a hill.
Oh,
we just have these crazy. So what happened? So there's dead cat's ashes.
Absolutely. And
what happened was
they both wanted them.
Why not just 50-50?
That's what got the binder thrown at me. I told my client, I go, why don't you split them? She says no, and threw the binder at me and was so offended that I said that. So I said, listen, I don't think your husband really wants them. I think he's doing it just to mess with you and get
like the
rise out of you or try. Exactly. I go, I don't think he really wants it. He's just doing it. She didn't believe that or continued. It was egging her on more. They each spent, I think it was around another $30,000 each in attorney fees fighting over the ashes.
$30,000 each,
approximately, if I remember correctly. And we told our client, listen, it's costing you money, and we send our invoices twice a month. And the reason we do twice a month, well, we do it in all cases, but the reason it's important in family law is it adds up quickly when you're paying hourly and you're fighting over stuff like that. We keep telling her, listen, we don't know that that's the best financial move. She says she doesn't care. She'll spend everything on it. And a lot of times we give them time to think about it because we want them to think rationally about it and more objectively rather than in the heat of the moment. Because a lot of divorces, that's what people are thinking. That's why I tell a lot of my clients, sleep on it, take some time, think about it, talk to family or friends that you trust or somebody you can confide in. Talk it over, think about it. Don't just take my word for it because it is your own life. And a lot of times in that passion leads you to spend way more than you should. And in that case, at the end, you know what happened? Her husband laughed and goes, I didn't want them anyway. I just wanted to make you spend more money.
Oh,
and so
that's crazy, right? That's
absolutely
crazy.
And people do that a lot. I had another crazy one where my client's husband wanted her to spend more money and he did something absolutely crazy.
What did he do?
So
divorce case,
and they're in the military.
They're in the military.
So they don't really have what's called a home state.
Because they have to like move around to bases and stuff.
Yeah. So like, for example, in Michigan, the file in Michigan, there's some exceptions. And one of them, I believe, is the military. But usually you have to be a resident of the state for at least 6 months prior to filing and a resident of the county for at least 10 days prior to filing for divorce. And sometimes, speaking of that, people will go rent a place in a different county they believe is more favorable and file there. Now, it's a little different if you have kids. They could control where the kids are, all kinds of stuff. But anyway, in this situation, what husband was doing was going to different states, hiring lawyers and having them file, telling him he doesn't really have a home state, he's in the military, have them file for divorce, and even went to different countries and would file for divorce.
File for divorce in Afghanistan and stuff?
It wasn't Afghanistan, but other countries. And the reason he did that was to make my client spend more money and have to hire lawyers that were licensed in each of those states, in each of those countries, to file a motion, to try to have it dismissed, to show where the proper venue and jurisdiction is. And that was...
How many divorce cases did the guy file around the world?
I mean, if I remember correctly, it was probably somewhere between 7 and 10 cases in different states.
Oh my gosh. And so this lady's having to go and hire attorneys in like all these weird states and countries?
Absolutely, yeah, because we weren't licensed there. We couldn't handle it there. Obviously, we talked to who the local counsel is, and ultimately, we tried to get them sanctioned and punished by the judge in the case that we were representing her in for filing in all these places. And there was a little bit of a shift in attorney fees. A lot of times people are responsible for their own attorney fees. It comes out of the marital pot or the marital estate. In this case, I believe he was ordered to pay a certain percentage of her attorney fees for having to hire all these lawyers all over the place.
That's crazy,
It
man.
was absolutely
People
crazy.
just do because it's more about like in a lot of the cases. Not, I'm sure every case isn't like this. I'm sure you've had amicable divorces.
We've had very amicable divorces, and I got to tell you, a lot of times clients ask, hey, what do you think this case is going to cost? We have X number of dollars, or estate is worth X number of dollars. I go, really, that doesn't really dictate how much your case is going to be worth. It could be that many dollars sitting in a bank account that are easy to divide, or in stocks that are easy to divide the day of the market that you decide is going to be the day you split it. It could be that you own businesses that have to get valued, and that's where it makes a big difference, because each side's hiring their own expert, and the experts could have a totally different valuation, and then they argue, or a judge or the mediator might bring in a neutral to figure out what's going on, or might take it and split it in the middle. So it's always different in those type of situations. But there's situations where people have a lot of money and are smart about it, in the sense that, hey, we're going to go to mediation. We're not going to make any of this public.
So mediation is when both sides kind of go to a lawyer usually?
Yeah, it's a lawyer, either retired judge or experienced family law lawyer in these situations, who is usually credentialed to mediate, has certification to mediate cases.
And they try to work it out like a settlement.
Yeah,
right?
and what that means is they're going to go into each side and talk to one spouse and their lawyer in one room, the other spouse and their lawyer in one room. It used to be in the old days to put everybody in the same rooms. A lot of the older mediators and older retired judges still do that, but it seems to work better lately, have them separate rooms.
Yeah, I don't want to be in the same room as my ex.
Yeah, they go back and forth, and they're going to tell you things you don't want to hear. They're going to tell them things that they don't want to hear. And ultimately what they're going to do is try to come up with something that is partially going to be your idea, partially their idea, but on what's going to make sense depending on all the specific facts of your case, the jurisdiction you're in, the judge, what the tendencies are of that judge. And here's the difference. A mediator is going to take time to listen to you privately about your family dynamics, about your children, about your property. Whereas a judge isn't going to have that time to hear that. All the judge is going to hear whatever's allowed to be presented through the rules of evidence. And
so how many divorce cases actually go to trial compared to settled? Do you think?
I don't know the exact percentage, but I think it's less than 10% go to trial, and maybe even way less than that. I think it was like 1 or 2% actually go to trial. Custody cases will go more, but that's back to as far as what they cost. You never know. It depends on what people are willing to spend money fighting over.
Have you seen people fight over crazy stuff like baby food?
Yeah, actually, absolutely. I had one where the clients were younger, didn't make my client and the spouse didn't necessarily make a lot of money, but they had a young children, and they would fight over everything, including the brand of diapers, the brand of baby food. Whenever they would a milestone, whether a potty training or a baby food or a solid food or whatever it is, they would both want to be there, but they couldn't be in the room together because they weren't getting along at that point.
Oh my gosh.
And what would happen is both would want their lawyers there. The mediator would be there.
When they fed the baby?
Yeah, a parenting coordinator would
Stop
be there.
It.
Everybody would be there, and they're spending thousands of dollars an hour.
So all these strangers would be there to feed the baby?
Correct, because they couldn't act like the parents couldn't act like adults and get along. And I listen. And do I think that particular time was my client's fault? No, I think the spouse egged my client on a lot and knew the trigger points and get people to act out. But listen, I always say this, and I've heard this before. I'm not the author of this, but typically, divorce clients are good people who do crazy things because they're going through the worst time of their life at that point. And anytime somebody's going through something bad in their life and pressure, they do weird
stuff
and do things that you typically wouldn't do. And we tell
like out of character things.
Yeah, and we tell our clients a lot. It's like, listen, my criminal clients are usually on their best behavior because they're on bond or
they don't want to go
probation.
to jail.
Exactly.
They don't want to go to the slammer, the big Alabama slammer.
And divorce cases are doing crazy things, and it's not uncommon to see arrests a lot of times arising out of divorce cases, whether it be somebody sentenced
like domestic violence.
Like that.
But hold on, I got to understand this baby food thing. So you're telling me that the clients paid a lawyer on each side.
Yes.
A referee of some sort.
A mediator. And a parenting time coordinator.
What's a parenting time coordinator?
Is somebody that's going to be there during, they could have different roles. One could determine what the parenting time should be after observing them. A lot of times, what they do is they're actually there for parenting time, like a supervisor.
And they all come out?
Yeah. Oh, and then I believe in that case, there might have been a GAL as well, a guardian ad litem, which is
and
a
all
lawyer
these people
for
came
the
out
children.
to the house?
Yes.
For a baby.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times it was a neutral location because they didn't want each
bring
other's
the
houses.
baby to like Bucci's or like a neutral location to feed the baby?
Yeah.
And with all these people there?
Yep.
That can't be good for the kid either. The kid's going to be effed up. Like,
and that's what we try to encourage our clients, that that's not the smartest thing. And then it got to a point where we always said that, listen, just have the one person, neutral person that you guys can agree on to be there. We don't all need to be there. And we've always said that from the beginning. But in the beginning, we almost had to be there kind of
it's sad. You know, one of my buddies who's a lawyer in Wisconsin, and he's going through kind of a family thing, and in his case, his significant other, former significant other, and they have a child together, made a false accusation of domestic violence, and as a result, got what's called a personal protection order.
Yes.
She said that he didn't live at the house, and then the police said you gotta move out temporarily, and then when he moved out, she rented a U-Haul van and stole all of his stuff. So he gets home eventually after he had to go to court, but it takes time for all this stuff to happen.
Absolutely it does.
So he had to go to court and said, this is a lie. I live there.
Yeah.
I've lived there for 3 years, Judge. I've never done anything to hurt her. And when he got home, she had loaded in the U-Haul van his washer, his dryer, his 4 TVs, his chest of drawers, all of his equipment, and literally stole it. And he went to the police, and there's nothing we can do about it. You have a pending domestic case.
Yeah.
Have you seen things like this happen?
It happens
do people
a lot.
abuse and make up things to gain an upper hand in this divorce stuff?
They do. 2 things with that. One is, a lot of times with these personal protection orders, they're what's called ex parte, and a lot of times.
So explain in English to our viewers what that means.
That means that one side can ask for it without giving the other side notice, and having the other side be able to object and argue their side to a judge.
So one side goes to a judge,
yes,
in secret, kind of by themselves,
yes,
without the other side there, and says all these bad things.
And that's permitted if you could show a reasonable likelihood that irreparable harm could happen.
Like he's going to kill me or something.
He's going to kill me. He's going to destroy my property. He's going to drain all the bank accounts. He's going to shoot me. He's going to whatever the case may be.
But can't people make stuff up?
Unfortunately, they do. They're not supposed to, but they do. Because you're supposed to swear under oath that everything you said there was
like
true.
She swore under oath in this case that he didn't live there, and he did. I mean, it's like uncontrovertible.
And here's the scary thing:
nothing happened
I
to
don't
her.
blame
Nothing
the
happened.
judges, because they have to err on the side of caution. Because what if she did get killed if a judge didn't sign it and wanted to hear from him first?
I'm
So
not blaming the judge, but what do you do? I mean,
unfortunately, what I tell my clients is, you've got to be quiet. You got to be on your best behavior. You got to stay away. Don't violate the no contact order. The no contact order, both in criminal cases and through a personal protection order, or restraining order, as it's called some places. It's a lot of them. Well, they all now include, I believe they all include social media, but that's a way of contacting people as well. Don't do anything. Here's the thing, like in a situation of your buddies, I'm sure he was probably itching to tell his side of the story or have it heard.
Oh, he wanted to, he was dying to do it.
And that's the thing, is during that time, as hard as this may be, and it's easy for us as lawyers who aren't necessarily experiencing this right now to sit and say, stay calm, stay quiet.
Yeah,
don't
he had to
talk
go
anybody,
sleep
don't
on a
reach out
buddy's
to anybody.
couch while his house was being raided.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like insane to me.
And unfortunately, that's part of it.
And she never got in trouble.
Well,
Jeff, she never got in trouble. I mean, do you see that? Like,
yeah, because it's family law cases, and in family law cases, there's a lot of leniency. A lot of times, judges will give you a lot of warnings or a lot of small slaps before you get punished big.
Which is crazy to me, because if somebody came and took me out of my house and then stole all my stuff while I was gone, that would be like criminal burglary felony. But
here's the thing: when people are married and it's a family situation, and oftentimes, especially if they have children, judges want to do whatever they can to try to keep the peace between them as much as possible. It rarely ever does any good for one of the two parents to get charged criminally, or to get locked up, or to lose a job, or to do anything like that. typically does not help. And in situations with the, whether, again, personal protection or situations like that where that happens and where people lie, I see it, unfortunately, way too much, because people, when they file for divorce, typically don't want to continue to live in the house with the person they're
So
divorcing.
what happens? How does that work in divorce? Like, let's say I'm married. It's horrible. It's toxic, because your home is supposed to be your castle.
Yeah.
Do you have to live with your ex in the house?
In most situations, yes, unless somebody voluntarily moves out. And if somebody were to voluntarily move out and they call me, I would probably say, if you have children, let's get a parenting time order in place first, because it's going to be a lot harder later on. Not to say it's not going to be done, but it takes time, as you said, to get back into court, and depending which county you're in or which jurisdiction you're in, it could take a little longer to get in before the judge to get that parenting time order in place. Now, hopefully there's a reasonable family law lawyer or experienced lawyer on the other side that is amicable, and you could work out your own potential.
Can't you ask for like executive occupancy or something?
Exclusive occupancy you still can ask for it, but what happened was, prior to the 08-09 economic crash crisis, people would ask for exclusive occupancy.
And tell us what that is. What is
it means that you want to live in the house. You want to live in the house either alone or you and your kids, and you want your spouse that you're divorcing out of the house. Judges back then were more likely to order it after the economy went down. And decline. Judges the theory was, why should we have people spend money to support two households when they could suck it up, live in one, save whatever money they can, because they're ultimately going to be separate. And also, let's see if there's a chance for reconciliation. Sometimes it's not healthy, and especially in situations of domestic violence. But one of the biggest exceptions were domestic violence. Judges will force somebody out. A lot of times, if they get charged criminally or if there's a personal protection order, there'll be a no contact order that won't allow them to return to the house anyway, and that could be with the property.
Have you seen people make fake charges just to because that gives them a huge upper hand, right?
Absolutely. I've had several cases, and some I can remember very vividly, where a spouse has made up an allegation against my client, for example, stating that my client hit them or hurt them. Once in a while, it backfires, and they'll arrest the person who called the phone.
For making a false police report.
Yes, or sometimes they don't believe the story, and they believe that they're the ones that initiated, or they're the ones that struck or hit first. Or sometimes nobody hit anybody, and sometimes people will try to self-inflict wounds on themselves.
No way. Have you seen that happen
I had
before?
A situation where my client was a big guy. His wife was a smaller, petite, attractive woman. And the police believed her at first when they came. She had scratches, bruises, marks, whatever. And later on, it turned out she had she was scratching herself, gotten her husband's golf clubs and hit herself with them. And the only way we were able to find that out was there was a surveillance camera in the garage. And that's how we were able to prove that, was she did it to herself.
So wait, she was taking her husband's golf club and hitting herself in the head with it?
Not in the head, but on her, I believe it was her arm or her legs at the time.
On video?
And bruises. And she apparently forgot that they have a surveillance camera in the garage.
What an
idiot. Had to monitor their cars and their property.
I hope she got it charged or something.
She didn't get charged. Again, it's a family law case.
It's crazy, dude, but that's like fraud.
But here's the thing.
Dude, somebody accuses me of assaulting them, and it could cost me my career or my life.
But here's the thing. You typically, especially if you have children with the person who you're divorcing, you don't necessarily want them to get charged with a crime, because especially if you're dependent upon them for support, or even if you're paying support, because then they won't be able to work, and potentially you're going to have to support them. But
that's frame job, dude. That's
the children.
framing.
It's also the parent of your children, and a lot of times people don't want to do that to the parent of their children. It's totally different than. And I tell people this all the time.
But she's framing
I know,
the parent.
But I tell this to people all the time. If it was two random people that got in a fight at a bar, it's totally different than a husband and wife, or a husband and husband, or wife and wife who get in a fight at home. And especially you have children together, it's totally different.
I get it, but that's savage, dude.
Nobody is saying that whatever, any of this stuff is okay. And obviously, if you're in an abusive situation, get out of it right away. And I tell people, don't hesitate to call the police, but it's got to be a situation where you're honest. Don't fabricate anything, because a lot of times it will come back to bite you in the ass.
Yeah, if you
the
get
truth
caught,
eventually does come. The truth absolutely eventually comes out.
And my buddy in Wisconsin, who I was talking about, he went through a lot of false allegations, but eventually, And some of them were horrible. Like, they could have cost him his job. Eventually, after enough of this fake stuff, the GAL or whatever, the mediator or whoever it was, kind of got wind of what was really going on.
Oh yeah, and they eventually do, and that's why it's important to mediate cases. And back to when we were talking about how much a case could cost and whether it becomes public or not. Usually, people who have a lot to lose or are very public in their profession or whatever it may be, whether there's a professional athlete or a politician, elected official, somebody that runs a well-known business or with notoriety. Typically, we don't hear about the details of their case because it's done in private. They wanted
mediation. To see it be sealed, right? Like,
yes,
like Trump. Remember Trump and Stormy Daniels?
Oh yeah.
That was like a sealed deal. It wasn't a family thing, but it was
with
like
the family law cases, what you could do is what's called a confidential settlement agreement. And the judgment of divorce, which becomes public, that people know as a divorce decree, all it says is there's been a confidential settlement agreement, which is binding, and it's merged and incorporated. Nobody ever sees it. Everything else you do in a divorce case, when you're filing motions,
it's all that's public,
it's public
dude.
record. Anybody could see it. And people are like, wow, this person, I go to church with this person, or I go to whatever with this person, and they're sitting there accusing their spouse of whatever. They're being accused of whatever.
It's some of the most horrible stuff.
And I tell my clients before they file any motion, and there's some lawyers out there that unfortunately say, hey, I'm getting paid to file this motion. I'm going to file it anyway. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I tell my clients to think about it 20 times or more before you file a motion, because that becomes public. You can't undo it then.
You can't undo it. Well, what about, okay, do you have a lot of, now that gay marriage has been recognized as legal. And by the United States Supreme Court, do you do these types of cases? Do you have any crazy gay marriage cases?
I've had several, and
tell me about like your craziest one.
Well, I've got a few crazy ones, but both of them, the two I could think of involve a lot of calling the police on each other, a lot of allegations of domestic violence, a lot of same type of personality or attitude on both sides. Typically in a traditional marriage, the roles are a little bit different as far as, and listen, it's the same in a lot of gay marriages as well, where the roles could be different. One could be a working spouse, one could be a stay-at-home spouse. But and listen, even in modern traditional marriages where it's a man and a wife, heterosexual marriage, even in those, these days, it could be both spouses, or either it could be trust fund babies and both stay home and take care of the family and the kids, or they could both be working. But a lot of times what I find with gay marriages is that it's two of the same personality sometimes, which is clashing, because sometimes you have a personality that's like this and another personality like that. They're not necessarily causing as much spark between each other. It just doesn't work.
One is more dominant than the other, or whatever.
Or whatever. Each one has a different personality. Like, for example, a lot of times as guys, we don't want the confrontation, right? And sometimes women want the confrontation, or vice versa. Maybe a guy that wants confrontation.
So what happened in this gay marriage case?
Well, what happened is
it was two guys, I'm assuming. Or
yes, two guys kept calling the police on each other.
Like, what are they calling the police and saying?
One hit somebody. One stole somebody's identity. One was
it made up, or
is violating? Some was made up and some was true. And like you said, even with your buddy's case where the police said this is a family law situation, we don't want to get involved. That's all the police were saying in this case is this is family law. We don't want to get involved between you two guys. And they ran through a whole lot of money fighting over stuff. And that's what people don't understand.
Like, what were they fighting over?
And just that, who's right and who's wrong. It wasn't property. It wasn't anything else. It was that one wanted to be vindicated and feel like they were the one that was right, and that the other one was the cause of the relationship. But that happens in all types of situations.
Yeah. Did you ever have anybody fight over like anything like goofy or?
I have had. I mean, I thought the cat's ashes is a big one.
Cat's ashes goofy.
Like I said, the bar stools. I've had people fight over. I had situation where people would fight over something and say it was passed on by their grandmother or their grandfather, and it turns out it's not true. They bought it at a flea shop or something.
Yeah.
And stuff like that happens. And
what about some of your professional athlete cases? And I bet a lot of them you probably can't talk about because I'm sure there's like, look, I've done a lot of professional athlete cases.
Yeah.
Okay. Assaults on my clients, herpes, STD transmission cases against professional athletes, all kinds of sexual harassment. And there's usually like super strict confidentiality agreements. So I understand some of you can't, but tell me about some of the ones that you can talk about in generalities.
Let's think about it. So typically when I represent a professional athlete, it's usually in negotiating some sort of settlement. It could be in a probate case where somebody's trying to get guardianship over maybe a family member, kids, stuff like that. A lot of custody, parenting time. Most of them, unfortunately, end up being alcohol-related cases,
like
drunk
a DUI
driving,
or something,
reckless drivings. And I tell this all the time to a lot of teams, a lot of agents, a lot of general counsels for professional sports teams and all sports teams, and it applies to everybody. But these guys and women can afford to hire professional driver or can afford to hire drivers. Why are you out there driving a vehicle when you have a whole lot to lose? First of all, you shouldn't be driving in those situations anyway, but that's the issue. And what I found, something crazy I found out is, and this is staying at different hotels where NBA teams stay while they're on the road traveling, is that a lot of professional athletes are actually, they'll be drinking wine or drinking whatever it is. And I always thought traditionally that, when you're a professional athlete, you probably shouldn't be drinking alcohol and maybe to perform better. And I mean, we all know how we feel if we drank too much the night before. And
Yeah.
So stuff like that. So unfortunately, what I find with a lot of my professional athlete clients is that they have a hard time with bond conditions and probation. Sometimes because they think that the law doesn't apply to them, or sometimes they think they can get away with it, or sometimes it's, most of the time what it is, it's simply the peer pressure from the other teammates. It's almost like being in high school and like you're the not cool kid if you don't drink or whatever it is. Well, in the situations, even with these grown men that are professional athletes, they'll get made fun of a lot of times and have pressure, but they've got to realize, listen, their career's on the line. A lot of guys have lost contracts over violating their probation.
Yeah. So that's funny. So I had two stories from that. So I'm from Pittsburgh, and I went back and visited, and I went out in South Side, which is a place with a lot of bars. And I was talking to one of the bartenders, and she said Ben Roethlisberger, quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this was when he was, pretty at like the height of his career. Yeah. That the Steelers would have actually hired a guy who would follow Roethlisberger around at the bars because he'd get so belligerent and get so drunk, and he wouldn't pay for anything and would like create scenes and cause a muck. This is what I was told. And so there was like a cleaner who would like go around and like pay for the bills after he left and like clean up and like make sure that all this stuff, because it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so that, I thought that was very interesting, that goes on.
Well, listen, and here's the thing. You're looked at with a microscope when you're somebody that's well-known or an athlete, and it's almost to a point to where you can't do anything anymore. And just...
When you got to be careful, too. Like, you could have an allegation of sexual abuse allegations. I mean, they're very serious, both professionally and personally. You could go to jail. It could end your career,
Absolutely.
And so you got to be really careful. And some are legitimate and some are not.
100%. Some are absolutely legitimate, and those are obviously very serious. But the sad part is there's also a lot that are fabricated, and people see it as a money grab a lot of times as well. And so we've dealt with all kinds of instances and all kinds of scenarios.
Yeah. So I just had a case. A lady claims that a NFL football player raped her.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so when I get these cases, I always am very careful, right? Because if you're going to make an allegation that's serious against a public person or even a non-public person, anybody, you better be pretty certain. So what I started doing is I have my clients generally take a lie detector test. Good. So I said, listen, if what you're telling me is true, I'm going to take your case. I'm going to help you. This is very serious. But before I file a lawsuit that's going to go on national news and TMZ, I said, I believe you, but I want you to go take a lie detector test. I scheduled this lady. She never showed up. And she started being weird about returning my calls. I said, okay, I don't feel something's right here. I said, I'm declining your case, right? If you're not willing.
I respect that and honor that so much, because unfortunately when I'm defending these athletes and we call up the plaintiff's counsel in these situations and it seems like they're not being true, or they're believing their client. It's not so much that the lawyer's not being truthful. I think I love to give the lawyers the benefit of the doubt, but I think they just didn't do their homework. They didn't do their due diligence. They're believing whatever their client told them, and it is very scary.
You got to be. I mean, that's like one of the most serious charges you can levy against somebody.
Absolutely.
And it happens. Like like Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby. Look at all that stuff. I had my professional athlete. I had several cases, but there's these STD cases are real. So I had one where a professional athlete gave this chick herpes.
Wow.
And so we sent a letter. I had a letter delivered. I said, before we file a lawsuit, let's just talk about settling the case. This is not going to be good for anybody if this comes out. Why don't we settle the case? Well, they hired a big, high-powered lawyer like yourself who said, this didn't happen. But we had texts where the athlete said, oh, I didn't give you herpes, but I'm here for you. I'll still have sex with you. Don't worry. And it's like, dude, what? Like, what are you talking about, dude? He did. Wow. And we had medical records. So we got the medical records to prove the case. Yeah. And we had everything substantiated. So that case settled, as it should have, Yeah. It should have. We went to private mediation. We settled.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't go away.
Obviously, we've both been involved in a lot of cases in the media, but sometimes it helps and sometimes it doesn't, depending on the type of case. And most of the time with my clients, we try to do whatever we can to keep it out of the media. And sometimes, and sometimes when you're in your position or representing a plaintiff in a case, sometimes it does help to bring awareness to the case, right?
It does, 100%. Yeah. I usually give an opportunity to defendant on a case like that to take responsibility, be accountable. Tell me if I'm missing something, like, hey, that's what your client's saying is not true. Here's why. And I'll look at it, right? Because I want to know. I'm not going to be stuck representing somebody that's making up something.
And when cases do become public, whether it be a criminal or a family law or a personal injury case or civil rights case, whatever it may be, the thing is to always be prepared to have a response no matter what the question is. Obviously, the proper response. But I don't like when lawyers either avoid completely the media when they're called upon. It's one thing if I respect, and I do this a lot, to where we don't want a case to become public. But if a case does become public, if you're not answering the phone or if you're saying no comment, that's
exactly. I always think that's kind of a bad advice.
100%.
To say no comment.
100%.
Like, say something.
I agree.
Say something.
Even if it's focusing on the positive things about your client. That's what I was always taught, is focus on the positive things about your client.
Yeah. Now, speaking of, so on the last episode, and I was talking to you a little bit before, on our last episode, we had Judge Draper on.
Okay.
And we talked about...
Great guy and great judge.
Great dude.
Yes.
Great dude. And we talked about a very famous case about Bob Bashera.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Bob Bashera, for those... If you didn't watch the last episode, everyone, please go watch it right now. And then you'll understand this a little bit more. But he had a sex dungeon underneath a restaurant and had like a swingers lounge and hired his handyman to kill his wife. Actually put a hit on his own wife. He ended up...
And he was ultimately convicted of that.
Convicted. He went to jail. He ended up passing away. And then he tried to kill the handyman while he was in jail. So
I do remember that.
But I understand that you knew Mr. Bashera.
I actually did meet him. I met him in a different country on a cruise ship when I was 15 years old. I had a family member that worked in the same company that he had worked in. And I still remember this bigger guy who was somewhere on the ship, and I remember had asked me if I like Bloody Marys. And I said, what's a Bloody Mary? And he's like, why don't you try one? And I guess maybe because we were on foreign waters or something, maybe they didn't ID or card. I mean, I've always looked a little older than I am, but at 15, I don't know. So that was actually my experience having first Bloody Mary when I met Bob Bashera when I was 15 years old.
And then did you see him at the funeral?
I did see him at the funeral.
Of his wife's funeral that he killed?
Yes.
And what happened?
I think he was shopping for a lawyer while he was at the funeral.
So what did he say?
I heard him asking who the connected lawyers were, and I thought that was kind of odd because at that point,
this dude who we now know murdered his wife is at the funeral of his own wife that he had murdered and was asking, who do I need to hire? Who's a good lawyer?
And I thought that was kind of odd because why is he asking for a lawyer? And then at first I'm thinking innocently that maybe he's asking for a lawyer to dig into the investigation. But I heard him say defense lawyer. But oftentimes, listen, as defense lawyers, we are hired by the victim's family to conduct a private investigation to find out if the police missed something or to assist
have a second look.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking all along.
But now we know.
Now we know that's not what it
oh
was.
my gosh,
Absolutely.
man!
Yeah.
What a crazy! You can't make this stuff up.
That's all. It's all
You
the things
can't
that
make
we
it
hear,
up.
the things that we deal with every day, and you know, it's something that, as far as not being able to make it up, we see a lot of people on social media with their spouses all lovey-dovey and saying these nice messages and this and that. And I'll tell you, my wife even says, she goes, why don't you ever say anything sweet other than just happy birthday? Why don't you ever say you're the greatest wife ever? And listen, I truly believe she is the greatest wife ever. But my experience with seeing people that say all this stuff on Facebook are generally people that have been in my office and have met with me about a divorce or are currently even going through a divorce or currently maybe in a side relationship somewhere else or doing something else.
You can't believe social media.
Absolutely
man.
Do not believe social media. A lot of the pictures are doctored that people post. A lot of the messages, the things people say. And I'm not saying everybody. Listen, there's a lot of genuinely good people out there and people in great relationships. But a lot of times, too, those are the same exact people that we could be representing.
They're going to be coming to see Jeff Abood.
And not that there's anything wrong with it. But listen, I tell people this all the time. It's just sometimes it's two great people that couldn't get along in a relationship. And a lot of times, unfortunately, through a divorce, it gets better or it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
It eventually gets better, but it's not always sweet and amicable. Obviously, especially me, I try to do everything possible to try to keep it as amicable as possible. Because at the end of the day, the clients are not going to be happy. And I tell a lot of clients from the very first meeting, I don't know that there's such a thing as being happy with the outcome of your divorce. No matter what it is, you're going to be typically losing money or living on less money than what you were used to. You're going to see your kids less than what you were used to or could have before. And you're paying me to make that happen. But the issue is you got to have somebody with the experience and the knowledge to know where and when to push and what to, for lack of a better term, concede on, but to still feel like you won. And I'm a mediator myself, and I love mediating cases, and I try to make both sides feel like they won. And that's ultimately the goal.
But the reality is, it's tough. It's
always tough. It's
well,
very
Jeff,
tough. It's very emotional.
I'm not calling you personally soon, buddy.
Hopefully you
Hey,
are.
thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
All right, it's been another amazing episode of Cases Gone Wild. Now, you know who social media is not fake. That's Marco Law and John Marco on Cases Gone Wild. We give you the real deal, the wildest cases, the most ridiculous stuff. If you need help, anyone you know, give us a call. Go to our website, marcolaw.com. That's www.markolaw.com. Or give us a call, 313-777-7LAW. We'll get you hooked up with Jeff Abood. You're a professional player. You want to sue a player, whatever. We're here for you. Thank you. Till next time, we'll see you in 2 weeks on another Cases Gone Wild.